Jay had been stressed for a while. He was standing in the kitchen with a mug of coffee. He didn't normally have time for a drink in the morning. Fall out of bed, roll to the bathroom, toilet, teeth, shower, dress, grab wallet, phone, keys, then run out the door. Run for the bus, the only exercise he got. Gasping for breath, he could just make it before the doors closed against him. No time for a nutritious breakfast to set him up for the day, let alone savouring a coffee, taking in the flavour and aromas while his mind relaxed and readied itself. Of course, he could have just set his alarm earlier, just 15 minutes, not hit snooze, not sit zombie-like scrawling the latest news and social media posts while emptying himself into the toilet. Then he would have had time to relax, eat at leisure, drink, refresh and awaken. But that was not a normal morning. Today, though, he'd woken up at 4 a.m. and couldn't get back to sleep. Some squawking bird or animal outside. But that wasn't the real reason he'd woken and stayed eyes open to the ceiling. He'd had some dream. He never remembered details, but this one was something about going to the bank with his mum. She was annoyed with him because they queued for hours to get to the counter, and when they got there, the counter was now more like a teacher or examiner's desk. He couldn't remember why he was there, or he didn't want to say. He was embarrassed. And he woke up, not in some sort of night terror, nightmare sweats, just one of those dreams where the everyday reality was refusing to go away. His heart was beating fast, and adrenaline surge with nowhere to go. So that everyday reality was weighing on him this morning. He couldn't see any way out of it. Probably didn't help that he hadn't had anything to drink last night. Normally he could rely on booze to knock him out for a good few hours till the alarm woke him too early. But last night he had stayed in with no alcohol in the house. Not through choice, but because he had absolutely no money. His overdraft was to the limit and just over it. He had begged the bank to give him more, but they refused. Actually, these days there was no one to beg to, no human to respond, or not, to any appeal to emotion, to pity, sadness, empathy, or even to flirtation or anger or aggression. There was just a computer algorithm that looked at the numbers, or that numbers passed through, to produce letters in a sequence. The sequence he was given, the words of damnation read, "It is not possible to extend your overdraft, and a loan is not possible at this time." There was no appeal, that was it, and it was a week till payday. He had some coins for the bus today. Beyond that, who could he ask for help? His mum in the dream had died last year. Sadly, her meagre home and savings had gone paying the nursing home bills. She had gone some months earlier, her dementia taking the remnants of mind. He had kept visiting once a week, at weekends, but she didn't know who he was. "I'm sorry, we can't pay the rent today. My husband's lost his job, you see. Please let us stay here." It had been hard to bear. His mum had told him years ago that they had struggled to pay the rent when Dad was laid off from the factory. They'd been evicted one year when he was 5. He did vaguely remember men coming to the house and Mum crying, Dad shouting, then quiet. He could never talk to Dad about it as he grew up. It was an unspoken thing, the humiliation. They stayed with his sister for a while till Dad got another job. He never earned much, but they were able to rent a place of their own eventually. So Dad couldn't leave them anything when he died, just after he retired. He worked and worried and worked, and then he died. Jay sat in the chapel at the funeral and wondered, what was the point? These were the thoughts that kept him awake, looking at the ceiling, till he eventually got up at 6. So he had time to eat breakfast, some porridge with honey, and make a strong cup of coffee. And he stood now at the window in limbo, between what had happened before and how he could live for the rest of his life. The flat he rented was in a small block, not a concrete tower of despair, but a red brick pleasant building, beside a patch of trees. He wasn't going to be able to keep up the rent. He'd have to speak to the landlord. Another thing to worry about. Where could he go? He was stood at the window and suddenly realised he was facing a tree. He did know that, of course, he did. He'd lived there 6 months. He'd been in this kitchen every day. But he usually grabbed something to eat while watching something on his phone. Something on toast, frozen pizza in the oven, ready meal in the microwave. He didn't spend more than a glance out the window. Often it was dark, he was watching something on the internet. He grabbed the food and took it to his sofa or his bed and watched TV. Or he got takeaways or ate out. Well, that would have to stop. So now he looked out of the window at the tree for the first time. The sun was dawning and it was a clear day. The bright gold came over the buildings to his left and caught the trees in their late autumn sparseness. Trunk and branches had nothing to cloak them and shield what they held. Mum had died in autumn, rust and gold, Dad when it was colder, just before Christmas and the giving of presents. He saw a blackbird, well it was a black bird, in the branches. It was stood there looking at him. Well, looking in the direction of the window. Not at him. But he felt the bird was interested in him. It cocked its head to one side, then shifted around, so he could see the wing on his left side. A tuft of feathers stood out. He was a bit misshapen. That's what Jay thought anyway, but what did he know? He never learnt or studied nature. He didn't know what kind of tree that was. He remembered 1,000,000 years ago staying at his grandmother's and she had taken him to pick up conkers after they fell next to her block of flats. He didn't tell her that no one played conkers at school anymore, but he enjoyed being with her and picking up the broken spiky shells and finding the smooth nut inside. A seed, he realises now. The bird seemed happy to stand in the cluster of branches around it, like a protective cage, open, not holding it, but shielding him from predators. There was nothing to eat on the tree, no nest visible, no other bird to mate with, communicate with. So why was it just there? Jay watched him glanced occasionally at the clock. 20 minutes went by and the bird was still there. Jay suddenly thought that the bird was there because he liked it there. He felt secure. Perhaps he came back to the same place every day. Maybe it was like an old man who went to the same park each day, the same bench, because it was a place he felt happy. Perhaps a place of nostalgia where he used to sit with his wife or child. This is ridiculous. This is a bird. Birds, animals don't have feelings like that. Well, they may be protective of the young, but that was just a survival of the species thing. It wasn't emotional. They didn't retain nostalgic memories. That was a childlike fairy tale anthropomorphism, making animals in people's image. Then he thought of a headline he saw earlier when he got up. A shiny TV professor had said that people don't have souls. At the time, Jay just passed over it. Well, yeah, he never believed in any religion or any god, so he accepted what the scientist said. If anyone had asked Jay himself if he thought that people had souls, he'd have said no. Imaginary constructs to make people accept the meagre lot in return for an eternal reward. There was nothing to it, nothing that could help people pay the rent. Animals just ate, had offspring, let them grow so they could survive on their own, then they existed till they became food for some other creature or man. That was a cycle, an evolution. That was the bigger picture over centuries, as animals evolved to fit their environment better. But to what end? Someone had sent Jay one of those random funny animal YouTube videos the other day. A dog slid down a snowy hill. There was no meat or lady dog at the bottom. As soon as he came to the bottom, he bounded back up to do it again, like a little kid. Like Jay did when his mum and dad took him to the park and he went on the slide. There was no end, no purpose, no evolutionary lesson, no development of his mind and body for the struggle to survive ahead of him. It was just fun. And he laughed, and his mum and dad laughed, and for a moment they were happy. That was outside the struggle, that was beyond stress and fear. That was the soul.